All right, Colin, how are you doing today?
I've been better, Harry. My internet is the bane of my existence. So, other
We
than that, no,
are
great.
we are powering through some AV issues today with you. I'm going to blame you, but or you, I'm not going to blame you. I'm going to blame your internet. How about
Yeah, let's blame the thing that can't defend itself. That seems
that?
perfectly reasonable to me.
But
Um,
anyways, we've got no guest today, so we've got a fun episode planned.
yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be nice, at least for us, to hear our own voices. I don't know about what the guests will think or the all the audience will think, but we're going to talk a little bit, and I'm excited to ask you a little bit about what you've been up to.
Yeah, so I think we're going to our famed what do we call this segment? What have you been up to in the world of angel investing lately? It's a little bit of a long name, but
Yeah. Yeah, just what have you been doing this week in angel investing? But let's talk about it. I know you have some exciting, fun news that you maybe want to share.
did you say fun or fund?
Fund news that you might
Fun
want to
news.
share.
Yeah. So I don't know when we're going to publish this episode, and I haven't really announced it yet, but I do have a what I'm calling a mini fund that I'm launching. So I've got one LP, so it's a $500,000 fund that I'm going to be investing out of for the next year or two, 25K angel checks. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of the gist of it. So, kind of what I've been doing the past 3 or 4 years, but bigger and better checks and hopefully better companies too.
Nice. No, and that makes a lot of sense. It's nice to have some dry powder to go out there and really help the companies you're interested in. So is there, just for the audience and anyone that or startups that might be interested in now pitching Harry with the dry powder.
Yeah.
Where are you focused on? What can you invest in? What
Yeah.
stage? What are you thinking?
Yeah, that's why I'm almost a little bit scared to announce the fund since I'll get probably all of this kind of junky inbound from people raising money who, have never don't care about me or don't really know about me. And especially too, I mean, this is, I mean, as the name of this podcast might imply, I'm a wannabe angel, right? And so this isn't my full-time job. And so the sort of thesis of my fund is honestly to just kind of keep doing more of what I've been doing over the past 3, 4 years in the angel world. And I think as I've kind of hinted at here and there, and as I've sort of shared online, I really like angel investing and I love the process and, just everything about it. But I don't know that I make enough money to do it. And so this opportunity sort of fell in my lap and it was a little bit kind of too good to be true or hard to say no to. And so it is one LP $500,000 fund. I put up 10% of each deal. So I guess you would say the GP commit in this case is basically 10%. So, if we invest 25K into a new company, I'll put 2.5K into that deal. And we do it as in the form of a syndicate. So if we do it on Sidecar, for example, that's 27.5K total. They charge 4.5K in fees. So the actual investment that the company would receive is $23,000 in the form of a syndicate. And then, of course, if there's any other small checks that I could add on easily, either, kind of running a little mini syndicate for the founder, if they have people or if I have people in my network, I can kind of go through that process. And the companies that I'm looking for are really kind of what I've been doing. So I would say, really, I call it anything that moves: rideshare, mobility, gig economy, a little bit of food tech, logistics, transportation, anything in that ballpark, which I'm sort of, well known for and I've been spending the past 10 years in. And then also, I think the other area is my network. I think one thing that I've kind of discovered over the past couple of years is, I've met a lot of smart people, especially folks, that were early at Uber and early at Lyft and Bird and all of these different companies. And, I've kind of seen them in action. And so, if they're starting a company in a field that I know nothing about, I would still gladly invest in them because I know something about them that, I think is like unseen to the public. Like I've seen them in action basically, or I've worked with them personally. So that's kind of the gist of the fund.
Got it. And if people want to tag along in this syndicate, what's the best way to do that?
I don't know yet, to be honest. I would say if there is interest, email me and we can figure it out. But that's sort of the nice part, in which I'm gonna ask you a bit about when we talk about your syndicate. But one of the things I hate about syndicating deals is kind of you got to work to get the allocation, and then you have to sort of make sure that you have soft circled and lined up some LPs, and it's just like a lot of like bullshit and like back and forth that I don't personally enjoy. And so I feel like this kind of eliminates a lot of that, right? It's like, hey, hey, if I see a company and I know someone's a good fit for it, it's like, hey, hop on. I'm not trying to sell anyone anything. So I'm like kind of still trying to figure out the best way. But that's kind of the nice thing is that, the check size is enough that it's meaningful. And, if I can add people on easily in the future, I will. But it's not really my top priority at this moment.
Nice. Well, and do you think, companies, how you interact with them, how you go about getting the deal, any of that, do you think any of that's going to change from your current operational standard?
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely, I've sort of obviously mentioned it to quite a few people that, oh, I've got this, new $500,000 mini fund, which is obviously small in the world of VC and funds, but I mean, it's a lot for me personally. And, I mean, it sounds, it's not nothing, right? $25,000 check. And so I definitely, I mean, I know companies that I've already worked with or others, mentioned like, oh, hey, this might be more interesting to you. Like in the past, I think most of my value was as, sort of a small check, provide a lot of help kind of guy, right? And now I'm kind of hoping that it can be provide a lot of help and provide some cash too, right? Like a 25K check is actually meaningful. And so I kind of need to figure out the best way to approach it. I think definitely at the start, it's going to be kind of doing what I've been doing, sort of looking for good companies. And I don't really take cold pitches, but, companies that I meet through my conference or through my podcast or through my business or get introed to and sort of see what they're up to. But it always is a little tricky for me. It's like I meet a company and, like, oh, I met this new rideshare company and they were thinking, oh, is this something I could invest in? Maybe like, I almost feel like, man, these guys should be paying me. If you're starting a new rideshare company, like I'm the rideshare guide, like this is right up my alley, right? Like maybe it's some combo of advisor and investors. I'm still sort of navigating all that, but it is funny when, you have certain situations where you might give other people money to kind of do the same job. And then another company, they might give you money and then, or equity. And then another one might actually advertise with our business. So I'm kind of navigating all that, but that's also what I think makes it very fun.
So can we call you a VC now? Is that what you are?
No, I kind of prefer Wannabe Angel. So I think I've been introducing myself when I'm ever at a VC party or anything like that. And people ask me if I'm an investor. I say, no, I'm a wannabe. And it usually gets a chuckle, but I think it's also kind of true. So that's kind of the name I'm going to stick with for now.
Nice. Well, that's exciting. And, I think what I'm excited for you to do is be able to, like you said, do more meaningful checks into the businesses that you care about and really help them. I think like Jack said, it's like, once you start going 25K and up, you can meaningfully start paying for salary of a person, things like that. They're really impactful for a business. So that's
Yeah.
awesome.
And I think the other thing too that I'm looking at is, I've got one LP and I'll give a shout out to Bloomberg Beta since they were basically the ones, they're my
Yeah.
one LP. And, so I definitely feel a higher level of responsibility now that I'm investing other people's money. And so I still kind of want to balance, like, just because it's someone else's money, I don't want to invest completely different. But, when you're a steward of someone else's money, I think it does make you think twice, about every investment or, kind of the goals that you have in mind. And so, yeah, I'm kind of excited and, looking forward to figuring that out.
And have you made your first investment yet?
I have not made my first investment, but gotten close on a few. And I think I'm looking at a couple right now that are very, I would say one is very close and another is kind of still not a no yet. Let's put it that way.
Optionality. Waiting to see.
Yeah.
Um, well, you'll have to update us on your first investment. We'll have to have a celebration when it goes out.
Definitely, definitely. So yeah, I'll keep everyone posted, and we'll see how it goes. But I know that you've been syndicating a lot of deals. You had a cool post on the Sidecar blog. Speaking of Sidecar, and let me see, the title was "Building a 200 plus investor syndicate in 6 months." And I think, as this post mentions, as you wrote, like you and I have syndicated a deal before, and you are much better than me at syndicating deals, getting money from your network. And I'll also say I think you have a better network than me, so maybe that's implied. But I've got some people in there, and so yeah, I wanted to talk to you about your syndicate. I mean, what do you tell people? Do you tell people you have a syndicate, or how do you kind of pitch yourself in that realm?
Yeah, I didn't start saying I had a syndicate because I really, the way I started was I was helping a company that I really liked and was like, well, maybe I can participate in the economics of the round somehow.
Hmm.
And someone told me, hey, you could do a syndicate. And so I was like, oh, let's go check this out. And so that's kind of really what it came down to, is like I wanted to help this company, was introducing them to great VCs, and I wanted to participate. So I basically figured out the most cost efficient way to set up a syndicate that kind of fit within my parameters, and that ended up being Sidecar. And they've been really great ever since. And I went out and just, it was all of a sudden, I was like, okay, I got this link to raise some money in an allocation. I better go figure out who can help me put some money in, because I was putting money in. And then so I just basically started with my closest network of friends,
Got it.
and really former colleagues and things like that, and just pushed it out to them. Hey, are you interested? And surprisingly,
So you sent them
I
an
wrote,
email like, "Hey, here's a deal I'm looking at," etc.
it was really more like I texted them and was like,
Got it. So
yo,
close friends.
yeah, yeah. But honestly, that's like a lot of the way I communicate with people is through text message.
Hmm.
A lot of these contexts. But yes, I normally send out with the syndicate an email announcing the deal, first call, kind of an update, and then a last call is usually the kind of the way I
Got
handle
it.
that.
And so your
Uh,
syndicate, this is Yonder Ventures. Is that what you
mhm.
call it? Cool.
Yeah,
And I guess tactically, so you have an email list of, it sounds like, at least 200 people that you've kind of added, casually over time, or I'm guessing, have told you that they want to invest or something like that.
yeah. So at first it was, I texted the peripheral group of people, and then I just went through my Rolodex and was like, okay, here are people I know that angel invest. Let's outreach to them, see what they are doing.
Hmm.
Most people want to do it, and then I publicly announced it, and a bunch of people signed up. And then we co-syndicated, which brought some other people in. And then really with every deal, one of the things I've always thought about was like, well, there's a type of person that is usually good to invest in this type of business, right? Like
Mm.
whether let's say it's a logistics business, you go find people in logistics and that are doing angel investment, and you ask them, hey,
Yeah.
are you interested? And so that's kind of what I've been doing, and kind of rounding out the syndicate with every kind of deal I do is finding area experts.
Got it.
And it is a onesie, twosie type situation, but you build some really high quality people that way.
Got it. So let's say you had a logistics company, you met the founder, you got an allocation, and you would kind of float it to one or two or three people that are in your network who are in the logistics space, who do angel investing, and kind of use them as sort of a soft circle, I guess you would say, like, hey, yeah, I can do this syndicate because I think I have a few people. Is that sort of how the logistics work?
Yeah, typically I try to like get a sense, is this doable from some
Hmm.
LPs that are pretty reliable, that come in on
Do you
most
do
deals and
that
say, hey,
before asking the founder? Like, how do you chicken and egg? Because obviously, if you ask a founder for an allocation and then you can't fill it, kind of look like an idiot, right?
yeah. So anything that's on the cusp, and I can go into what like is a cusp deal.
Hmm.
Anything that's on the cusp, I tend to go out and just canvas a bit first to see like, hey, is this going to
Got
be
it.
doable? If it's a deal
So
where,
if you getting an allocation is on the cusp, then you sort of go canvas and see if there's a few LPs who might be interested in joining you.
yeah, well, so think about it this way, like, so most deals have for syndication have a few qualities that you probably want to like solve for. One, unlike conviction investing where you control, it's like your check, kind of like what you're seeing now, where it's your check, you get to decide,
Hmm.
you get to do whatever you want. Like you're kind of fine going in early and being the strength. Whereas with syndicates, you're almost having to sell the company just as much as the founder is to other
Yeah.
people, right? And so what really helps in those situations is, do they have a great lead investor,
Right.
right? Like, I mean, that the number one thing, whether
Yeah.
you like it or not, for syndicates is, do they have a great lead? Two, is it in a good space? Three, do they have good revenue and unit economics? Right. And so what ends up
Yeah.
happening is that early stage deals, pre-revenue and things like that, actually tend to be harder to fund
Mm.
through a syndicate. Uh, Maybe there's people out there that like have figured that out, but what I've seen is that it's just harder without traction, and
Hmm.
harder for the GP to go sell it.
Yeah.
So if you only have one of those things, that's true, and like let's say it's like not the lead investor being great, that's when I got to go canvas and see like, can I get some traction,
Got
right?
it.
Like, does this hit home within my audience?
So if they've got a good lead investor, that kind of obviously signals to other people that, like, hey, this company is legit. They've got some, social proof or validation. And I think especially with the syndicate model, that lead investor is important. I know my friends who run the Uber syndicate. I'll give Amr and William a shout out because, I think that's one of the big things they say. They've got a bunch of folks, in their network network, and it's like they're not professional investors, and so they trust the recommendations that are being brought, but it's like they want to see some other big names because it's like this is something, oh, cool company, maybe I can help. Yeah, there's legit money involved. Let me throw some money of my own in. So it does seem like that good lead investor is like a very important component of syndicating a deal successfully.
It's very helpful, and mostly because you think about it this way: you
Very
write
helpful. Yeah, that's a good way to
yeah,
put it. That
you
makes
write
it
the
a lot
deal memo.
easier.
Yeah, you're writing a deal memo for all of these, right? To basically
Yeah.
convince, or at least give everyone the most information possible and context of why you want to syndicate this to these
Oh.
LPs, and that's basically your document going out trying to convince people, right? And if you're not going to talk to every single LP, you want as many proof points that make it easy
Mhm.
for them to make a decision, which a great lead investor, is critical. So give you an example. So I've done, I think 6, 7, 8, I don't know, somewhere in there. It's going up. And deals, and
How many have you done?
I'm losing count now. I think
Okay,
finished
ballpark 6 or 7.
6, but there's like 9 like
Okay,
9
a few
total
more in
in
motion.
motion. Yeah. And so the thing is that, the deals that, I've been really into and like don't necessarily always have the most named
Yeah,
investors on them. But the most recently I did a deal that Kraft ended up leading, and that deal filled in like literally 12 hours.
yeah,
Like it was easy, right?
yeah,
And that tells you a lot about the brand name,
for sure.
impact there.
Well,
And
and I think the other thing that it makes me think of is that, like, for those of us that are like, I'm down here on the syndicate journey, and you're kind of a little bit, maybe a bit above me. And what you really want to go is like up at the top, where like, hey, if Yonder Ventures is in on this deal, that's the signal, right? I think that's kind of, I don't know if that's your goal, but I imagine that if you can get to that point where you're at least in the ballpark where like people want to invest. I mean, we had Kirk, we met on our podcast, and he basically said like, hey, I invested in every single deal that Naval did as an angel. And, I'll be honest, I don't think you or I are going to be Naval anytime soon. But if you can get in that ballpark, right, where like people trust you and they will invest alongside you, almost blind faith, I mean, that makes it a lot easier too to start syndicating these deals.
yeah, I think this takes time, track record, all of it,
Yeah,
right? So
cool.
yeah.
Well, I think we'll definitely, I kind of wanted to tease this syndicate idea and, my fund. I'm sure we can dig into these in the future, but I think that's sort of a good tease for now. And before we let the audience go, I know we've got a couple trending Twitter threads before we leave. So I'll go ahead for those that are watching live or watching on YouTube. I'll share my screen and you can read off this first tweet from Mark Byrne, if that sounds good.
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Here's the tweet.
Now that I've closed my Series A, I just want to say that 26 of the 34 funds I pitched gave me some variation of keep us in the loop when you find a lead, and only 7 had the stones to say no. Much respect for the no's, nothing but contempt for the keep us in the loop cohort. All right. And then he subtweeted this. I do not keep any of them in the loop. Figure out how to make a decision and stand behind it. You disgusting little monster babies.
Yeah, there was like, it was pretty spicy, but also like I couldn't quite tell. Like, I don't know, Mark. I'm gonna give him a follow though for this tweet for sure. It looks like he's now making sustainable liquor at Good Liquor Works. We make good vodka, a climate positive spirit distilled from discarded coffee fruit. Oh, that sounds pretty cool. So he's got a cool startup, cool company. Obviously, he's doing well. They just raised their Series A in this climate, but I feel like he's probably personality wise, like kind of a jokester, but also serious, not serious, but like he's like jokester, but like, hey guys, what the fuck? kind of kind of
Yeah.
tweet, right? What do you think?
Yeah. So I understand where he's coming from, but I think, it really doesn't kind of come from a place of understanding of how VCs are thinking about it, right? They're thinking a lot about optionality, right? They're like, well, if this ends up getting a lead and I then can support it, of course I'll do it. Right. And so that's like an optionality. It's like for him, it's like a yes or a no. You believe in me or you don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the wrong dichotomy for founders to think about this problem. It's
Mm-hmm.
more of when or not yet, right? Like it's a continuum, and that even in my experience with startups, we've, companies I worked at, we had investors say no earlier stage and then come in later and pay a markup
Yeah.
because they got the traction. They liked the economics, but, just things were in the right place such that they wanted to invest. And so I just don't think it's as cut and dry as you're
Yeah.
either with me or you're not. I just don't think that's a
Yeah.
good way to go through life with
I
this.
think that's a good summary. I think I disagree with this tweet in that I think you and I are on the same page. It's not a binary situation where, yeah, with me or against me. Because I mean, even the example you just shared with the syndicate, right? Yeah, if Craft Ventures is leading, it's like, wow, everyone knows Craft and knows the brand, and they're going to invest in that deal. It makes it a hotter deal. And I feel like I've experienced this with founders too in the mobility space, or like, oh, if Rachel Holt's fund, Construct Capital, is going to be in, like, yeah, we're in too. I'm like, well, yeah, no shit. If like one of the top mobility funds is in, then it like makes it a lot easier. And they're a big check. So I kind of get the sentiment. I'm just trying to think about like in reality, right from that, let's say I'm one of these VCs, I'm one of these 26 that said, keep us in the loop when you find a lead. I'm trying to think about like I kind of get it that, there's a reply here from Glenn Rockman. He said, sometimes a VC is legit not in a position to lead around and is legit interested in being posted on participation opportunities when a lead emerges, right? I mean, if this is a 10 or $20 million round, right? Like I kind of get that, like maybe they're not a lead, maybe they're not prepared to take a board seat or whatever. And you're kind of agreeing, at a Series A level, like you're agreeing to come on with a bunch of other investors. So it's like you want to make sure that they're a good group, that you get along with them. Like probably wouldn't be a good idea to like say yes to investing and then it's like some random guy or girl or fund comes in and you hate them, or you know what I mean, something like that.
Yeah, I just think, some like Glenn's saying, some funds are set up to be follow-on funds, right? Part of their
Yeah.
investment thesis is you need
Mm,
a name fund to be the lead.
yeah.
And that's an investment strategy. And I get his sentiment of like, yeah, they should just be LPs. And I just don't think it's quite as cut and dry as that.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of funds that are smaller funds that, like you said, maybe invest in Series A and B stage where they can't lead around. Like
Yeah.
they're not going to write a check large enough.
And actually, I
They need a
feel like
lead.
some of the funds that I've worked with, literally in their description or what they'll tell me is like, we don't lead. You know what I mean? So I think maybe that's the other key thing. If they kind of set that might be a good takeaway. If like you set the expectations up front, like, hey, we don't lead Series A, but if there's a strong investor or whatever your kind of expectations are, maybe there's, I mean, to me, I'm always big on like, what are the expectations so that no one goes into it. Mark maybe goes into it thinking these guys might lead, and then they're like, oh no, we don't even lead in the first place, right? It's like, all right, well, I just wasted my time if I'm looking for a lead.
Yeah. One gripe I had on this is that with with a startup recently, I said, "Hey, I'm not going to invest. I'm going to pass." And I offered to make introductions for them, and they said, "No, we don't want you to make any introductions because it's a bad signal that you passed." And I was like, "Well, maybe not. Like, why is it a bad signal? I'm still happy to help you and make
I
introductions.
think
Like
it
for me,
depends on the reason why you pass, right? If
yeah.
this is a marketplace company and you're a marketplace investor and you pass, then I kind of agree with the founder. I'd be like, dude, I don't want Colin telling other investors like, hey, I passed on this, but maybe it's good for you. If it's like out of your
Well,
domain, that might make more sense to me.
but I still think that missed the context of maybe they have minimum that you can't, like, wasn't right, or they
Yeah.
had, the valuation was too high, or things like that. I mean, there's plenty of situations where it's just mechanically is not a good deal to invest in, but I love the
Yeah.
business of the company, and I'm not going to forego my common sense about, low cost basis
Yeah.
to make an investment. And if they don't want, and the founder doesn't want to come down on valuation or the amount they want to raise or whatever it may
Yeah.
be, then I don't think me passing is saying that it's a bad investment, like the company is bad. It's just saying at those terms, this is not an investment I would make.
Yeah.
So
Well, this was a good start. I like these spicy takes, Mark, and I
yeah,
mean, there's a reason why we call it trending Twitter threads, right? So the second one that we've got this week, I think, is kind of cool too, and it sounds like it's from both of our friends. So Noah Kagan.
I not as well as you probably do, but I know him through our my friend and our kids go to school together. So that's how I
Okay,
know Noah.
cool. Well, he has a cool podcast, and I think he's been actually doing a lot on YouTube also lately over the past year or two. Some really high production videos, entrepreneur, and investing and startups, and a little bit of everything. But actually, I went on his podcast a few years ago, and out of all the media I've ever done for the rideshare guy, I probably got the most people reaching out to me saying they heard me on Noah's podcast than anything else, mainstream, NPR, Wired, any other podcast I've
Wow.
ever done. So he's got a good following. And anyways, his tweet was, "I have no idea why anyone wants to be employee 150,000 at Google when they can have massive impact, serious learning, and great upside at a startup." 3.8 million views on this tweet. Wow, that's kind of a lot. What do you think, Colin?
Yeah, I mean, look, this has been my career in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
When I got into tech, I went into a horizontal marketplace and learned a lot. It was like more middle stage, I would say, like Series B-ish area.
Yeah.
And then I went to a large tech company and immediately was kind of like, yeah, this is great to see how like what success and the final end product looks like.
Mm-hmm.
But man, is this not the phase that I want to be at for building a company? And so after that, I went and became a third employee at a company. And yeah, that was like hard work and everything, but man, that was like probably the most rewarding experiences in my life and where I
Yeah.
learned the most. It was like an MBA in 2 years, basically, or less.
So the most liked reply was from Michelle Tandler, and she says, "Because you can make $500,000 a year at age 28." And Noah says, "Okay, quitting AppSumo and dusting off my resume." I mean, kind of true, right? If you're, a software engineer or someone, kind of doing well at one of these companies, I mean, that's kind of the reason to do Google, right?
Yeah,
Make a lot of money, not have
it's
to work that hard.
it's funny because Noah did work at Facebook at
Yeah,
some
he was
point.
what I think famously fired or whatever her story is,
uh,
right?
yeah, but I think this is like a low percentage of people. I think that's the headline, but not actually the reality for most people. In this,
Gotcha. I mean, I guess if you can, I mean, it's really software engineer, right? That's a $500,000 a year at age 28 kind of job at Meta, Google, et cetera. I mean, there aren't a ton of other roles where, you can make that much money. I think you can still do well, make 300,000 bucks as, product manager, marketing, whatever, at a lot of these bigger later stage companies. But it's really the software engineers, right? Where you start getting the big bucks at young age if you're not, an executive.
yeah, and I think it misses the point though. Massive impact, serious learning. Like yes, you're going to probably learn some things, but you're also going to get dictated to what you're going to do, right? Like you're a much smaller, like a cog in a much larger
Yeah.
picture. So
So, I mean, I think it's kind of a function of personality type too, right? Like, I have friends who are founders, who are operators, who are builders. I have a friend who was at Lyft and then Uber and then Bird as an exec. And, he ended up founding a startup. And I remember when he was thinking about what he was going to do next, he was like, "Oh, should I go into VC or go work at Google?" And I'm like, I feel like that's not your personality. You know what I mean? Like, that's like more my personality. Like I
yeah,
like high leverage, not grinding out 60, 80, 90. I did that when I was starting my business, but now I'm kind of over that. And I feel like it's like, you kind of know the people who are startup people, who are builders, and they don't get the same, like, you could give them 500,000 to go work at Google, but like, they'd probably rather not have that job, right?
yeah. I feel like I always self-sabotage myself in those types of interviews. So like I get to the point, get through it, and then I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like that's not me. So I totally get that. Like I like my hands dirty personally. Just like the 0 to 1 phase is just that it gives
Yeah.
me psychological dividends. So
Yeah,
uh,
I
yeah.
like this reply here from Mihailo Bjelic. He says, "Being a founder is not for everyone. It's actually not for most of the people. People generally have way happier life working for a company, enjoying stability, lower stress levels, work-life balance, etc. Founding a startup can quite literally ruin their life." And I think I agree with that. I think that like being early and being a founder is not for most people. I mean, I feel like, I mean, there's a reason why there's only usually one or two founders at each company, or, kind of early stage people. I mean, it's tough. It's a grind, right?
It is 100% a grind. And I think you just got to be clear that if you do it, you're going to get the value out of the process
Yeah.
rather than the outcome. Like, I don't think that the upside that Noah's talking about there is a reality for most people. I'd say
Yeah,
it's like
I
a
agree. I think the
mirage, I would say.
upside for most early stage startups is like way, I mean, if you're a founder, obviously you're trying to convince people like, hey, yeah, come join. You might, we'll be the next Uber, right? So I get it from
That's
why they're
sales.
selling that vision. But yeah, I think much like on average, right? Like the returns are going to be much better on average for like that Google employee than, startup people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to
Or
like,
maybe on median. I don't know about average if you've got one really outsized. On median for sure. Average, I'm not so sure.
yeah, I don't remember who said it, but I was reading somewhere that was like maybe the best strategy is work at big tech, make a lot of money, get the stock value, and then do angel investing as
Hmm.
well. Basically, diversify yourself that way, but keep the high cash flow. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say I'll give one more point to sort of working at the big companies because, I used to be an aerospace engineer working for Boeing like 10 years ago. That was my last career. And we used to always have these crazy, 5S, standard work, Kaizen, all these, red light, green light, all this different stuff. And I was like, this is the stupidest stuff I've ever seen, for an engineer working in the office. And now over the past 10 years of running my own business, I kind of get like, oh, you want to have all these checklists so your employees don't mess all these things up. It's like, hey, follow this checklist so that, you don't forget to tweet out the podcast or whatever it might be. So I think there are definitely some benefits to working at a large organization. And I think, ultimately maybe implementing some of that, if you go into a startup or a small company. So Noah, thank you for this tweet and definitely check out his podcast. All right, we'll see what the people have to say about this solo episode with Colin and Harry. No guest. I think our next episode we've got a lot of guests lined up, but this one we had the opportunity to jump on you and I. So good work, Colin.
likewise, it was good
All right,
chatting with the two of
until
us.
next time.
Au revoir.